My name is Laura, and before I tell you about the night I walked onto a stage and blew my family's world apart, I need you to know something about silence. I'm 32 years old now, but for most of my life, silence was my language. It was my shield, my comfort, my curse. In a family of roaring fires, I was the quiet ember banked and ignored, glowing with a heat they couldn't be bothered to see. The night of the Sterling Press annual gala, that ember was about to become an inferno. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to see you best, then you know the kind of quiet I'm talking about. Before I dive into exactly how I turned my family's biggest professional triumph into their most public personal humiliation, let me know where you're all watching from in the comments below. I find it comforting to know I'm not just talking into the void anymore. And if my story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button to join our community of people who've learned to find their own voice. To understand that night, you have to understand the years that led to it. You have to understand the weight of being a Sterling. My mother, Eleanor Sterling, was a legend in publishing. An editor whose name on a manuscript was like a royal seal. She could spot a Pulitzer from 100 paces, and her critiques, delivered in a low, musical voice, could dismantle an author's ego in under a minute. My brother, Daniel, was her prodigy, her golden boy. He had her sharp eye and their father's relentless charm. By 30, he was the youngest senior agent at Sterling Press, the family's publishing house, a titan of the literary world built by my grandfather. They were a dynasty, a closed loop of impeccable taste and soaring ambition. And then there was me, Laura, the quiet one, the family's gentle, baffling disappointment. My ambition, or lack thereof, was the main topic of conversation at every family dinner. These dinners were exquisite torture. Held in my mother's sprawling, book-lined apartment overlooking Central Park, they were less about family and more about performance. Daniel would recount his latest conquest, a 7-figure deal for a debut novelist he'd discovered waiting tables in Brooklyn. Mother would hold court, dissecting the latest bestseller from a rival house with surgical precision. And I would sit there, a ghost at the feast, pushing a wilted piece of arugula around my plate. "And you, Laura?" my mother would ask, her voice softening with that particular brand of pity she reserved for me. "How is the writing going?" She always paused before the word writing, as if it were a foreign term she was struggling to translate. "It's going well," I'd say, my voice always feeling too small in that cavernous dining room. I just finished the memoir for Tiffany Blade. Tiffany Blade was a reality television star whose primary claim to fame was throwing a glass of Chardonnay at her sister on national television. Her memoir, which I had written entirely from a series of barely coherent voice notes, was titled Spilling the Tea and the Chardonnay. It was soul-crushing work. My days were spent trying to weave a narrative of empowerment and resilience out of a life that seemed to consist mainly of spa appointments and feuds over Instagram sponsorships. Daniel would sigh, a theatrical, world-weary sound. He'd place his fork down with deliberate care. "Laura, we've talked about this. Tiffany Blade isn't an author, she's a brand. This isn't real work. It's content creation." The way he said content creation made it sound like a terminal illness. "It pays the bills," I'd murmur, my gaze fixed on my plate. "Paying the bills isn't the point," my mother would cut in, her disappointment a cold front moving across the table. "Your grandfather built Sterling Press on a foundation of literary merit. Your brother is discovering the next generation of great American novelists. And you are chronicling the inner thoughts of a woman who thinks Epiphany is a brand of expensive water. We just worry you have no drive, darling. It's like you're afraid to even try. Afraid to try." The irony of it was a bitter pill I had to swallow at every single one of these gatherings. Because what they didn't know, what no one in their glittering, insulated world knew, was that I was trying. And I was succeeding beyond their wildest dreams. What they didn't know was that while I spent my days polishing the vacuous prose of D-list celebrities, I spent my nights becoming someone else entirely. I was Author X. For the past 3 years, Author X had been the single biggest phenomenon in publishing. My thrillers, dark, intricate, and relentlessly paced, had dominated the New York Times bestseller list. My debut, The Echo Chamber, had sold 12 million copies worldwide. My second, The Alibi of Scars, had done even better. My third, No Such Ghost, had just been released to critical and commercial acclaim, and the film rights had sold for a breathtaking sum. Author X was a phantom, a complete unknown. I had no social media, gave no interviews, and had no author photo. The mystery was a marketing goldmine, fueling endless speculation. Was it a famous author writing under a pseudonym? A reclusive genius? The theories were wild, and my own family was at the epicenter of the frenzy to find me. Sterling Press, my family's own house, was leading the charge. They were desperate to unmask and sign Author X. It had become a personal crusade for my brother Daniel. He saw signing me as the ultimate prize, the move that would cement his legacy. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, I sometimes felt I would choke on it. I would sit at those family dinners, listening to them discuss strategies for luring me out of hiding, offering me their pity and their unsolicited career advice, and I would just nod, the quiet one, the disappointment, while inside I was screaming with a laughter that bordered on madness. The secret had been born out of a much older wound. When I was 19, I had written my first novel. It was a thriller, a bit rough around the edges, but it had a spark. I knew it. I'd poured my entire soul into it, spending a year hunched over my laptop in my dorm room. With my heart pounding, I'd given the manuscript to my mother. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever done. She was the gatekeeper, the oracle. Her approval was the only thing I had ever wanted. She took the manuscript, a thick stack of pages bound by a rubber band, and placed it on her nightstand. "I'll get to it when I can, darling," she'd said, already distracted by a galley proof she was editing. A week went by. Then two. Every time I asked, she'd wave a hand dismissively. "I'm swamped, Laura. The fall list is a disaster." Finally, after a month, I found the manuscript on the corner of her desk, a coffee ring staining the top page. I knew she hadn't read past the first chapter. When I confronted her, my voice trembling, she'd given me a sad, gentle smile. "Laura, sweetheart," she'd said, taking my hands. "Your prose is competent. But this genre, thrillers, are so commercial. They're plot-driven entertainments, not literature. Your talent is more subtle. You're observant. Quiet. Maybe you should think about a career in editing. Like me. You have to play to your strengths." She thought she was being kind. But what I heard was, "You are not good enough. Your stories are not worthy. You are not one of us." The words had branded themselves onto my heart. That day I made a vow. I would never again show them my work. I would never again ask for their validation. If I was going to succeed, I would do it on my own terms, so far outside their world that they would never even see me. And so Author X was born. My entire anonymous existence was made possible by one man, Arthur Vance. Arthur had been my father's estate lawyer, a wonderfully ancient man with a wit as sharp as his bespoke suits and a fierce loyalty that was the antithesis of my family's conditional love. My father, a quiet academic who had always been my champion, passed away when I was in college. Before he died, he'd told me, "If you ever need someone who is entirely in your corner, you go to Arthur." After my mother had crushed my spirit, I went to Arthur. I showed him the manuscript she had dismissed. He read the entire thing in one night, sitting in his leather-chaired office, and when he finished, he'd looked at me over the top of his spectacles, his eyes glinting. "Laura," he'd said, his voice rumbling with conviction, "this is a goddamn hit. What do you want to do with it?" "I want to publish it," I'd said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I don't want anyone to know it's me. Especially not them." Arthur had smiled. "A ghost. I like it. We'll set up a shell corporation. I'll act as your agent of record. They'll never know." And they never did. Arthur handled everything. The contracts, the finances, the fielding of increasingly desperate offers from publishers around the world, including, much to our shared amusement, Sterling Press. He was my firewall, my confidant, my one-man cheering section. He was the family I had chosen. Which brought me to tonight, the Sterling Press annual gala. It was the publishing industry's version of the Oscars, a glittering, self-congratulatory affair held in the grand ballroom of a historic hotel. Tonight, the main event was a special honor for my brother Daniel, for his impeccable taste and visionary leadership in discovering new talent. And, as he'd announced at our last family dinner with unbearable smugness, he was going to use his acceptance speech to officially announce his career-defining mission: to find and sign Author X, no matter the cost. The invitation had been sitting on my counter for a month, a thick cream-colored cardstock that felt like a summons. I had planned to ignore it, to feign a sudden illness. But then, a week ago, another one of those family dinners had happened. It was worse than usual. My ghostwritten memoir for a disgraced boy band member had just come out. "I saw it in a bookstore," Daniel had said, shaking his head with a pained expression. "Right by the checkout, next to the gum. Is that really where you want your work to live, Laura?" "It's a bestseller," I'd pointed out quietly. It had improbably hit number 3. A bestseller in the who cares category, he'd shot back. I'm trying to build a legacy here. Mom built a legacy. What are you building? A bookshelf of nobodies. My mother had chimed in, her voice dripping with concern that felt like acid. Daniel is right, dear. We want more for you. We want you to have a real career, a life you can be proud of. We would be so happy to help you. Daniel could find you a place as a junior editor. You could learn the ropes. I'd sat there, my knuckles white around my wine glass, the ghost of Tiffany Blade, and the disgraced boy band singer, and a dozen other sad, fame-hungry clients swirling around my head. And in that moment, something inside me, a piece of steel that had been forged in years of silent resentment, finally hardened into a decision. I wasn't just going to the gala. I was going to end the silence. I was going to introduce them to the legacy I had already built. As I stood in front of my mirror, zipping up a simple, elegant black dress that was the opposite of the sequined, attention-seeking gowns my mother and her friends would be wearing, my phone buzzed. It was Arthur. Are you sure about this, kiddo? His voice crackled on the line. Once this particular genie is out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in. The offer from Sterling is astronomical. You could just take it quietly. I looked at my reflection. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see the quiet disappointment. I saw a woman who had built an empire in secret. I saw Author X. They're not just offering money, Arthur, I said, my voice steady. They're offering it as a prize for my brother to come and discover me. My success is meant to be his trophy. The validation they refused to give me for free, they're now willing to pay 8 figures for, as long as they can take all the credit. It's not about the money. It's about the introduction. It's time they finally met me. There was a pause, and then I heard his deep, satisfied chuckle. All right then. Give him hell, Laura. The world is watching. I hung up, took one last look in the mirror, and walked out the door. The night of the gala had arrived, and with it, the end of my story as the family disappointment. The final chapter was about to be written, not in the quiet of my apartment, but on a brightly lit stage in front of everyone. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a symphony of excess. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped crystals from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air hummed with the sound of clinking champagne flutes, insincere laughter, and the relentless buzz of industry gossip. I felt like a ghost slipping through the crowd, an island of black silk in an ocean of sequins and bravado. My family, of course, was holding court near the grand staircase, the gravitational center of the room. My mother, elegant in a silver gown, was chatting with a famous literary critic, while Daniel, looking every bit the conquering hero, was surrounded by a coterie of younger agents and editors hanging on his every word. I made my way over, a knot tightening in my stomach. Mother! Daniel! I said, my voice getting lost in the noise. Daniel turned, his eyes skimming over me with a flicker of surprise, as if he'd forgotten I was even invited. Laura! You made it. Good. Try to network a little tonight, okay? Don't just stand in a corner. The editor from The Atlantic is over by the bar. At least try to look ambitious. He gave me a patronizing pat on the arm before turning back to his admirers. My mother offered me a cheek to kiss, her skin cool and fragrant with expensive perfume. Darling, you look simple. Very you. She scanned the room. Now do try to be useful. If you see Jonathan Franzen, please point him out to me. I have a bone to pick with him about his latest interview. And just like that, I was dismissed. I was a tool, a signpost, a piece of furniture in the grand tableau of their success. The familiar sting of it was duller this time, overlaid with the cold, hard certainty of what I was about to do. I drifted away from them, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I needed the fortification. I found a relatively quiet spot near a towering floral arrangement and watched the spectacle. It was surreal hearing my name, my other name, on the lips of everyone around me. I heard Author X is a reclusive former spy. A woman with a feather in her hair whispered conspiratorially to her companion. That's why the books are so authentic. Nonsense, her companion, a man with a perfectly manicured beard, scoffed. It's clearly Stephen King under a new pseudonym. The pacing is identical. My source at Sterling says they're close. Another agent chimed in, leaning in so I could easily overhear. Daniel Sterling has made it his personal mission. They're prepared to write a check so big it would make Jeff Bezos blush. Can you imagine the prestige? Unmasking and signing Author X? It would be the coup of the century. A small, bitter smile touched my lips. A coup. That was certainly one word for it. I was about to stage a coup of my own. As I stood there, lost in my thoughts, a gentle voice beside me said, "It's all a bit much, isn't it?" I turned to see a kind-faced, elderly woman. I recognized her instantly. It was Margot Davies, a legendary editor who had retired from a rival house years ago. She was one of the few people my mother spoke of with genuine respect. "Margot," I said, surprised. "It's Laura Sterling." Her eyes lit up with genuine warmth. "Of course. Eleanor's daughter. I remember you from when you were an intern. The quiet one with the sad eyes. I always thought you were the most observant person in the room." She gestured around at the glittering chaos. "Don't let all this fool you, my dear. 90% of it is just noise. The only thing that matters is the work on the page." She gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "I hope you're still writing. You had a real spark." Tears pricked my eyes. This woman, a near stranger, had seen more in me during a summer internship a decade ago than my own mother had seen in a lifetime. "Thank you, Margot," I said, my voice thick. "That means more than you know." "Good," she said with a knowing smile. "Now, I'm going to find the canapes before they're all gone." Her simple act of kindness was the final piece of armor I needed. It reminded me that the world was bigger than my family's suffocating judgment. It reminded me that my worth wasn't determined by their narrow definition of success. Bolstered, I knew what I had to do next. I needed to see my brother one last time before I brought the curtain down. I found him heading towards the back of the ballroom, presumably to the green room to prepare for his speech. I intercepted him near a corridor. "Daniel," I said, my voice firmer than before. He stopped, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Laura, I'm about to go on. Can this wait?" "No," I said. "I just wanted to say good luck. I know this is a big night for you." I was trying one last time to find a crack in his armor, a hint of the brother I used to build forts with in the living room. He softened, but only slightly. "Thanks, Laura. Look, I know we're hard on you. We see this world," he gestured vaguely at the opulent room, "and we want you to be a part of it. A real part. Not just on the fringes." He checked his watch, his focus already shifting. "Listen, I've got to go. But after my speech, things are going to get crazy. This Author X announcement is huge. I'm going to find him. I'm going to bring him into the Sterling fold. We're going to shape his career, manage his image. He's a raw, brilliant talent, but he needs the Sterling machine behind him to become a true global icon. He doesn't know it yet, but we're going to make him a legend." He was talking about me as if I were a wild animal he was planning to capture and tame. Shape my career. Manage my image. He wasn't interested in the artist. He was interested in the asset. The raw material he could mold into another trophy for the Sterling case. The last flicker of hope for some kind of quiet, private understanding died in that corridor. He would never see me. He could only see the reflection of his own ambition. "I see," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Well, break a leg, Daniel." He gave me a quick, distracted nod and disappeared down the hall. I stood there for a moment, the noise of the gala fading into a dull roar. The path ahead was clear. There was no more doubt, no more hesitation. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. I made my way back to the family's table, a prime spot right at the edge of the stage. My mother was now deep in conversation with the chairman of the board. She glanced at me as I sat down. "Don't slouch, Laura," she murmured without breaking her conversation. I sat up straight, my back a rigid plank. I placed my hands in my lap, my fingers laced together tightly. I felt a strange and powerful serenity descend upon me. It was the calm of a soldier before a battle they know they will win. The lights began to dim. A hush fell over the crowd. The host, a smarmy television personality, walked to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the speakers. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate the best and brightest in our industry. And there are few brighter than our next honoree." He launched into a glowing introduction of Daniel, listing his achievements, his multi-million-dollar deals, his unerring eye for talent. I felt my mother preen beside me. This was her vindication, her legacy secured through her son. My heart was a drumbeat against my ribs, steady and strong. I pulled out my phone under the table and sent a single text to Arthur. "It's time." My phone buzzed almost instantly. "The world is waiting. And so is your accountant." A real smile, the first genuine smile of the night, touched my lips. I slipped the phone back into my purse. The host was winding down. "A man whose vision is shaping the future of literature itself. Please welcome to the stage, the Vice President of Sterling Press, Daniel Sterling." The room erupted in thunderous applause. Daniel walked onto the stage, soaking it in, a king accepting the adoration of his court. He looked out over the crowd, his eyes shining with triumph. He looked directly at our table and gave my mother a small, private nod. He didn't even glance at me. I was invisible, just as I had always been. But not for long. The spotlight was about to shift. Daniel approached the podium, the applause slowly fading. He radiated a confidence that was so deeply ingrained it was part of his DNA. He was born for this, for the spotlight, for the adulation. He smoothed his tie, leaned into the microphone, and began to speak. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Thank you all. To stand here tonight, in a room filled with so much talent, writers, editors, agents, dreamers, is truly the honor of a lifetime." He was good. I had to give him that. He was charming, witty, and self-deprecating in all the right places. He told an amusing anecdote about his first day as an intern, fetching coffee for the very legends he now called his colleagues. He spoke with passion about the power of storytelling, about the sacred trust between a writer and a reader. He was painting a picture of himself as a devoted servant to the literary arts. But none of this, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, would be possible without the guidance of my mentor, my inspiration, and the sharpest eye in this business, my mother, Eleanor Sterling. He paused as a polite ripple of applause went through the room. My mother inclined her head, a gracious queen accepting her due. She taught me that our job is not just to sell books. It is to find the voices that matter, to champion the stories that need to be told. I felt a wave of nausea. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The woman who had dismissed my own story as commercial entertainment was being lionized as a champion of brave new voices. I glanced at her. She was watching her son with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride. It was a look she had never once given me. Daniel went on, his speech building towards its intended crescendo. He talked about the changing landscape of publishing, the challenges of the digital age, the need for bold, audacious moves. "And it is in that spirit of audacity," he declared, his voice rising, "that Sterling Press is embarking on its most ambitious quest to date." A murmur of anticipation went through the crowd. This was it. The big announcement. Daniel's face was alight with messianic fervor. For 3 years, our industry has been captivated, electrified, and utterly mystified by a singular, powerful voice. An author who emerged from nowhere to redefine the modern thriller. An author whose books are not merely read, but devoured. An author whose genius is matched only by their anonymity. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the name hang in the air. I am speaking, of course, about author X. The room buzzed with energy. This was the gossip everyone had been whispering about all night, now brought to center stage. Finding this author has become an obsession for publishers around the world, Daniel continued, his voice ringing with authority. But tonight, I am here to turn that obsession into a promise. I am announcing that Sterling Press is officially offering a record-breaking, 8-figure advance for the rights to author X's next novel. The largest in this company's history. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. 8 figures. It was a staggering, almost mythical sum. Even in this room of jaded high rollers, that number had the power to shock. "And I am personally staking my reputation on this," Daniel proclaimed, his eyes sweeping the room. "As of tomorrow morning, the full resources of my department will be dedicated to a single career-defining mission: to find, to court, and to sign author X. We will not rest until this literary ghost is brought into the light and given the home they deserve, at Sterling Press." The applause was deafening. It was a tidal wave of sound, washing over the stage, over Daniel, who stood there with his arms slightly raised, basking in it. He was Alexander the Great, announcing his plans to conquer the known world. It was his moment of ultimate triumph. And it was the perfect cue for me. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The scraping sound was lost in the applause, but my mother saw the movement. She turned to me, her face a mask of confusion and annoyance. "Laura, what on earth are you doing? Sit down. People are looking." Her voice was a furious hiss. I didn't answer her. I stood up. I placed my napkin on the table. And I started walking towards the stage. The journey from my table to the stage steps couldn't have been more than 30 feet, but it felt like a mile. Each step was a silent rebellion. With each footfall, I shed a layer of the person they thought I was. Step 1, the quiet daughter. Gone. Step 2, the unambitious ghostwriter. Gone. Step 3, the family disappointment. Gone. 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 The spotlight operator, confused by this unplanned movement, swung a secondary light in my direction. The beam caught me, and a murmur began to ripple through the sections of the crowd closest to me. The applause for Daniel started to falter as people turned to see who this woman in the simple black dress was, and why she was walking towards the stage with such unnerving purpose. On stage, Daniel was still smiling, though the smile was beginning to look strained. He saw me approaching, and his expression shifted from triumph to bewilderment, then to a flash of pure anger. He thought I was trying to upstage him, to create some kind of embarrassing family scene. "Laura," he mouthed, his voice inaudible over the dying applause. "What are you doing?" I ignored him. I reached the small set of stairs at the side of the stage and walked up them. By now, a tense, confused silence had fallen over the entire ballroom. Every eye was on me. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, 1,000 questions hanging in the air. I saw my mother's face in the crowd. It was ashen. She looked horrified, utterly humiliated. I walked directly to the podium, where my brother stood frozen like a statue. There was a secondary microphone there for dual presenters. I pulled it towards me. My hand was perfectly steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of jewels and confusion. Then I turned my head slightly to look at my brother. "Daniel," I said, my voice clear and calm, amplified by the speakers to fill every corner of the vast room. "That was a beautiful speech. Truly." He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury. "Get off the stage, Laura," he hissed into his own microphone, which he quickly tried to cover, but not before the words were broadcast to the entire room. I gave him a small, sad smile. Then I turned back to the audience. "My brother talks about a quest," I said, my voice resonating with a strength no one in my family had ever heard from me. "A mission to find a literary ghost. He's prepared to spend millions of dollars and stake his entire career on it." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "I just think I can save him and Sterling Press a lot of time and money." I looked from my stunned brother to my horrified mother, and then back out at the 1,000 pairs of eyes watching my every move. I took a deep, cleansing breath. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a perfect, crystalline silence, the kind I had lived in for years. But this time, I was the one who was about to break it. "You don't have to look so far, Daniel," I said, my voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. "My name is Laura Sterling, and I am Author X." For a single, eternal second, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. It was as if the entire world had stopped breathing. The only thing I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own heart, a wild bird beating against the cage of my ribs, finally free. Then a single camera flash went off, a silent explosion of light that seemed to break the spell. The silence shattered. It wasn't replaced by applause, but by a sound I'll never forget, a massive collective gasp that seemed to suck the very air out of the room, followed by an explosion of frantic, disbelieving whispers. It was the sound of 1,000 realities shifting at once. I looked at my brother. The color had drained from Daniel's face, leaving behind a waxy, vacant mask of shock. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide and unblinking. The golden boy, the conquering hero, looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, his own literary ghost, standing right next to him in the flesh. My gaze flickered to my mother at the table below. Her hand was pressed to her chest, her face a storm of conflicting emotions, disbelief, fury, and a dawning, sickening horror. It wasn't the horror of a mother seeing her daughter in distress. It was the horror of a master strategist realizing she had just been publicly, spectacularly outmaneuvered by the one player she had never even considered a threat. She looked utterly undone. I didn't wait for the whispers to turn into questions. I didn't wait for my brother to find his voice. I placed the microphone carefully back in its stand, turned, and walked off the stage with the same calm purpose with which I had ascended. I had said what I came to say. The introduction was complete. The moment I was off the stage and out of the main spotlight, the chaos erupted. It felt like a dam had broken. I was immediately engulfed. Not by reporters, not yet, but by my family. "Laura!" My mother was there first, her fingers digging into my arm like talons. Her face was a thundercloud. "What was that? What is the meaning of this circus? You have humiliated us. You have humiliated this family in front of everyone." Daniel was right behind her, his face now flushed with a furious, blotchy red. "Is this a joke? It has to be a joke. You're lying. You can't be Author X. It's impossible. You write fluff for reality stars. You don't have this in you." For the first time in my life, their anger and disbelief didn't make me shrink. It was like watching a storm from behind a wall of glass. Their words were loud, but they couldn't touch me. "A joke," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "No, Daniel. The joke was me sitting at dinner after dinner, listening to you pity my lack of ambition. The joke was you offering to find me a real job in the slush pile of a company that was desperately trying to sign me." I turned to my mother. "The impossibility, Mom. was you telling me that thrillers weren't literature, that I should play to my strengths. I did. My strength was proving you wrong. Their faces crumpled, a 1-2 punch of my words hitting their mark. They had no response. The truth was a light so bright it had blinded them. Before they could rally, before the accusations could morph into desperate pleading, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the noise. I believe Ms. Sterling is ready to leave. Arthur Vance materialized beside me, a bastion of calm in the swirling chaos. He looked impeccable in his tuxedo, not a single silver hair out of place. He fixed my mother and brother with a look of cool disapproval. All media inquiries and any professional correspondence for my client, he said, emphasizing the word client, can be directed to my office. He produced 2 business cards from an inside pocket and held them out. Daniel stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake. My mother flinched back as if it were on fire. Arthur gently took my elbow. Your car is waiting, Laura. He guided me away from my stunned, speechless family and towards a side exit. As we moved, the bubble of our private confrontation burst, and the wider world rushed in. Reporters who had been held at bay were now scrambling, shouting questions, their cameras flashing relentlessly. Miss Sterling, is it true? Why the secret for so long? Will you be signing with Sterling Press? Arthur, a master of navigating such scenes, moved through them like a ship parting the waves, murmuring, "No comment at this time." Over and over. We slipped out a service door and into the cool night air, where a black town car was idling at the curb. The driver leaped out to open the door. I slid inside and Arthur followed, shutting the door behind us. The sudden silence inside the car was as profound as the silence in the ballroom had been moments before. I leaned my head back against the cool leather and let out a long, shuddering breath. It felt like I had been holding it for 13 years. My body was trembling, a cocktail of adrenaline and exhilarating, terrifying freedom coursing through my veins. Arthur just sat beside me, silent, letting me have the moment. After a minute, he spoke, his voice gentle. Well, kiddo, the genie is well and truly out of the bottle. I let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob. I think the bottle just shattered. They have no legal standing, you know, he said, all business now. Your contracts are with the Shell Corporation, which you control. You are a free agent. The offers that were coming to my office before tonight will likely triple by morning. You hold all the cards, Laura. Every last one. His words were a comfort, a practical anchor in an emotional hurricane. I pulled out my phone. It was a useless brick of light and vibration, an endless stream of notifications, texts, and missed calls flooding the screen. I saw Daniel's name flash, then my mother's, then numbers I didn't recognize. I saw breaking news alerts with my face, a candid shot from the Gala, next to the words, Author X Unmasked. It was overwhelming. I turned the phone off and dropped it in my bag. So what's next? I asked, looking out the window as the car sped down a quiet side street, leaving the glittering chaos of the Gala far behind. Arthur smiled, a rare, wide grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Next, he said, we let them sweat. And then, you decide what your story is worth. Not just in dollars, but in respect. The weeks that followed the Gala were a blur. My life split into 2 distinct realities. In the outside world, I was a sensation, the biggest story in the literary universe. My face was on the cover of magazines. My books, all 3 of them, shot back to the top of every bestseller list, occupying the top 3 spots simultaneously. Arthur's prediction had been an understatement. His office was inundated with offers from every major publishing house on the planet, each more ludicrous than the last. They weren't just offering money, they were offering entire imprints to be built around me, creative control, global marketing campaigns designed by me. For the first time, people weren't telling me who I should be. They were asking me who I wanted to be. In my private world, however, there was mostly silence. I had moved out of my small, cramped apartment and used a fraction of my earnings to buy a beautiful, light-filled loft in a different neighborhood, a space that felt entirely my own. I changed my number. The only line of communication to my family was through Arthur, and for 2 weeks, they didn't use it. I imagined them huddled in my mother's apartment, shell-shocked, humiliated, trying to spin the narrative to their board of directors and the prying eyes of the press. I imagined them wrestling with the sheer, undeniable fact of my success, a success I had hidden from them, a success that now made them look like fools. The first communication came not as an apology, but as a business proposal. An official offer from Sterling Press, sent from their legal department to Arthur's office. It was impressive. It matched the highest competing offer and included a heartfelt, corporate-approved letter from Daniel about family legacy and healing the rift. Arthur and I sat in my new living room, the offer laid out on my coffee table. "It's a strong offer," he said neutrally. "On paper. They still don't get it," I said, shaking my head. "They think they can buy their way back to the head of the table. They think this is about money and legacy." "What is it about, Laura?" Arthur asked gently. I looked around my new home, at the shelves I would soon fill with my own books, not the ones I wrote for others. "It's about respect," I said, echoing his words from the car. "It's about partnering with people who valued my work before they knew my last name." I made my decision. The next day, Arthur announced that Author X had signed a multi-book deal with a rival publisher, one that had been championing my work anonymously for years. The press release noted that I was excited to continue a fruitful partnership built on mutual respect and creative freedom. The subtext was clear for anyone who cared to read it. I had chosen my professional family, and it wasn't the one I was born into. That announcement was the catalyst that finally brought them to my door. 2 days later, my new doorman buzzed to inform me that an Eleanor and a Daniel Sterling were in the lobby, demanding to see me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I told him to send them up. This was a conversation that had to be had, not in a ballroom or through lawyers but face to face. When I opened the door, they looked smaller than I remembered. The fury and arrogance were gone, replaced by a desperate, hollowed-out look. My mother's eyes darted around my apartment, taking in the space, the success it represented. Daniel wouldn't meet my gaze. "Laura," my mother began, her voice strained. We wanted to talk to you." "You should have called," I said calmly, stepping aside to let them in. They walked into the center of the room, looking awkward and out of place. It was Daniel who spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Why didn't you sign with us, Laura? We're your family. We matched the offer. It's Sterling Press. It's Dad's legacy. Granddad's legacy." "My legacy," I said, my voice even, "is the one I built by myself in the dark because my own family told me I wasn't good enough. My legacy has nothing to do with Sterling Press. You had your chance to be a part of it for years. You didn't want it then." "We didn't know," my mother cried out, the composure finally breaking. "How could we know? You never told us. You shut us out." "You shut me out first," I shot back, the old wound aching. "You shut me out when I was 19, and you left my manuscript on your desk with a coffee ring on it. You told me my passion wasn't literature. You told me to be an editor. You told me to be quiet. So I was. You can't be angry at me for learning the lesson you taught me so well." Tears were streaming down my mother's face now. "I was scared for you," she whispered, the confession so quiet I almost missed it. "This world, it's so cruel. I saw so many talented people get their hearts broken. I didn't want that for you. I thought if I steered you towards something safer." Daniel finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a shame that was profound. "I was jealous," he admitted, the words seeming to tear out of him. "All my life, I was the one who was supposed to be the star. And I worked for it. But you had this incredible talent you were just hiding. When I read your books after the gala, I was astounded. And I was so jealous. And so ashamed that I never saw it." It was the first honest thing either of them had said to me in years. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a solution. But it was a start. A crack of light in a wall that had been solid for a decade. I took a deep breath. The burning anger in my chest had cooled, leaving behind a kind of sad clarity. "I hear you," I said. "And I appreciate the honesty. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the years of feeling invisible." I walked over to my window, looking down at the city below. "I love you both. You're my family. But my work, my career, that's mine. It is separate. If we are going to have a relationship, it has to be a new one. One that isn't about Sterling Press or my ambition or your expectations. It has to be about us. And it has to start with respect. That's the only offer I'm willing to consider." They stood there in the silence, letting my terms sink in. It was a new kind of silence. Not the oppressive silence of disappointment, but a thoughtful, uncertain silence. The silence of a new, unwritten beginning. I didn't know if they could do it. I didn't know if we could ever truly repair what was broken. But for the first time, the future of our family felt like a choice, not a life sentence. And the choice, for once, was mine to make. Looking back on it all now, a few years later, the biggest lesson wasn't about the sweet taste of vindication or the shock on their faces. The real victory wasn't the fame or the money, though those things have certainly made my life easier. The real victory was in the quiet moment, standing in my own apartment, when I realized my self-worth had absolutely nothing to do with their approval. It had been there all along, forged in secret, nurtured by the stories I had to tell. Being underestimated was the greatest gift they ever gave me. It gave me the freedom to build myself into the person I was always meant to be, without their influence or their judgment. I am no longer the quiet one. My name is Laura Sterling, and I am the author of my own story. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. It's a strange thing to share something so personal, but I hope it gives strength to anyone out there who feels unseen or undervalued. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most? I would be honored if you shared your own story in the comments below. Let's create a space where every voice is heard. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and please subscribe for more stories about finding your power. Remember, family isn't just about the blood you share. It's about the people who see you, respect you, and champion you, even when you're still learning to champion yourself. Thank you for being a part of my community. I wish you all the strength in the world.